Hey you guys, what's up and welcome back to Two Toe Tags Metal Reviews, and today we're going to give you guys our final review of Apoptosis by Allegiant. So after one entire week of listening to this album file, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are pretty good. I like this album. I actually had a lot of fun listening to this album. But as normal, I have some gripes. My gripes are more like just personal gripes, just things that just didn't really click with me. But overall, as much as I did enjoy the album from beginning to end, I was having trouble finding anything that was really super special about it. Now, there were songs that jumped out at me, songs that I preferred, songs that I thought were a step above the rest. Exothermic Chemical Combustion is a song I mentioned 2 or 3 times in our first impressions. I'm mentioning it again now because it's probably the best song on the album for me personally. It just has the best vocal dynamic range. The pace of the song is really good. Love the riffing. Everything about it's really good. Really solid written song. The vocals is something I had an issue with on the first impressions, as far as it being a little bit stale. This song is the one song that I didn't feel that at all. But I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. I'm going to elaborate on that actually right now. The vocals. The vocals are not as stale or as flat as I originally thought. There's a lot more dynamics here than my first impressions led me to believe, but it's still not enough for me, other than this song. I still think more could have been done. I still think more range could have been put in there, more cleans perhaps, just something. Another example of some vocal dynamics that I don't think we mentioned before in the last video that is definitely a prominent thing is in Extremophiles B, he does the gutturals, where most of the time he's doing a low growl, and that song he does guttural several times, which is a step down on vocals, whereas in Exothermic Chemical Combustion, he does a step up in vocals and does more of a high growl. So I think that dynamic is cool, but for me it just wasn't enough. I want to see it more varied throughout the album. In addition to that, Metaphobia is another song that grew on me exponentially. I love that song. That song is amazing. Best riffs on the album for me. The solo is really good. The grooves are really good. Super solid song. Third song I want to mention is The Colors of the Currents, which is the acoustic interlude song. That song is just beautiful. It's so well written, it's so well performed. Again, personal gripe. This is a gripe I have with music in general. I do not like hearing finger sliding on strings. I know it creates, it's an authenticity and there's a purity there, but for me, it takes away from the character of the song. It's hard to put into words exactly what it is, but I prefer when acoustics are plugged in instead of mic'd. When it's mic'd, that's when you hear the strings. When it's plugged in, you don't hear the string slide. I just prefer the cleanliness of just the guitar and not hearing the string slide. Not a big thing. I still think the song is amazing. It's very pleasant to listen to, very just pleasing to my ear, and it breaks up the pace of the album very well. Maybe a better song placement for that song. Instead of having it at song 9, it could have been song 4 or 5 for me. But overall, I think that that's one of the top songs on the album, despite the fact that it's not really a technical death metal song like the rest of it. But yeah, what's up? What about you?
Well, it's good that you mentioned Colors of the Currents because I would like to talk about that with my assessment over the week, as I really liked that song because of how it broke up the action. And we talked about this last week. We talked about how it's a good interlude because you take all the crazy aggression that this album gives you and then it's split up. This song does a really good job as an interlude between them. But honestly, looking at the end of this album, it fits so much better because it comes right after Tsunami and Submergence, which is probably my favorite track on the album because the way it grew on me showed that there's so much contour to the music of this album. Like that song, it just kind of slowly pushes you through it. It's not like it just drops down hard immediately with something crazy. Like it works up to it and it has a good contour. And I feel the same way for the title track, which also grew on me. When we first listened to it in our first impressions, I didn't feel like the contour was strong enough to warrant a 10-minute song. But the more I'd listened to it throughout the week, like putting this album on over and over, I noticed that the contour is really not that bad, especially when compared to the other songs on the album.
Yeah.
It has a lot more of a shape to it, which makes it unique, which makes it worthy of being a 10-minute song, and I really like that.
Right.
Overall, this album is good. When we did our first impressions, I thought it was like a kind of base kind of good. Not amazing, but generally good. But I think now it is pretty good. You know, like it did get better for me over the week because in the songs that are a lot more active, a lot more intense, kind of throwing energy at you, the riffing is very good, and that's what really helps carry. Because you look at something like we commented on regarding the drums, it's very consistent, you know, there's not too much else happening, but I think the strong riffing is what carries that and makes that tolerable.
Yep.
Because if the riffing wasn't good enough, then it would get dry really quick.
Yep.
So I feel that that definitely saves a huge portion of this album. Like without that, it would hurt a lot. It wouldn't ruin this album, but I think like that's one of the strongest points.
I agree. The riffing definitely helped carry the album. Again, I have personal gripes with the riffing, but it's one of those things where there's awesome riffs throughout the album, but not enough to fill the voids that it needed to fill. You take a song like Apoptosis, the title track. That song takes almost 5 minutes before you start getting some riffs. Like, obviously there's riffs, but before you start getting anything that's like melodically memorable, right? 5 minutes into a 10-minute song and you're finally starting getting the grooves then, that's a little bit unacceptable to me. I don't say the first half of the song is bad, but it's just if you're relying on riffs to carry the music and you don't really get your best riffs in until your song's half over, I don't know if you're doing it right?
You also have to consider that a 10-minute long song, or songs that are usually there and even longer, tell a form of musical story.
Yes.
So it's not really the same as the other tracks that are relying on these riffs to be good. This one kind of just brings you to its own environment.
It does.
Taking those 5 minutes to kind of build you up to the song.
Yeah, I was just using that as an example because I do have a note specifically on that for that song. I can use that example for a lot of other songs as well. It's just, it felt like, you know, with the exception of songs like Metaphobia and Exothermic Chemical Combustion, which I'm getting tired of saying, those songs I feel like have riffs that carry the whole song. And they just, you can groove through the whole thing and jive through the whole thing and enjoy the whole thing. Every other song, I find, maybe not every one, but a lot of the other ones, the riffing is broken up to the point where you're hearing cool riffs here and there, and then you're hearing just constant strumming or constant chugging for a while, and then you hear the cool riffs again, and then constant chugging, constant strumming, whatever. The riffs did carry the album, I agree with that. I just still think they could have utilized that skill and that aspect more, and it would have made each song just more presentable.
I did notice, in regards to the riffing, it wasn't 100% of the time amazing riffing, I'm loving this. It was, I would put the album on, and then a riff would jump out at me, and I'd think, wow, this is cool, but it would always be at specific points. It wouldn't be the entirety of the album that would kind of jump out at me that way.
Right. Yeah, one more thing to touch on the riffs, as far as them being good, sure, they're good, but as far as them being catchy, few and far between.
Some of them are.
There's 2 or 3, maybe 4 riffs on this album that I found were catchy enough that they kind of got stuck in my head, and I was just, you know, driving. Even when I wasn't listening to the album, there was like a couple, like I can picture the riff of Metaphobia in my head right now. I can picture it because it's a catchy riff. There's not many of those on the album. They might be technical, they might be, you know, cool, whatever, but catchiness is what brings people to the music and makes you want to listen to the music over and over again, gives that replay value. I felt like it was a little bit lacking in that aspect.
That's fair. Anyway, I think it's time for us to get down to ratings. And I'm gonna take the floor here for my rating. This album was definitely solid. Honestly, throughout the week, it improved on me, like in terms of my impression. But that being said, I don't feel it was enough to really be a super strong, incredible album, but it was definitely good. So this album gets a 7 from me. Solid album, not enough for a toe tag, but still really good.
Good
How about
score.
you?
Good score. You know, like I started off this video saying I really like this album, and I do. I really enjoyed it. So there's nothing really bad about it. But the fact that I can't really find something special to say about most of the songs voids it immediately from getting a toe tag. So my score is obviously gonna be less than toe tag score. I can toss scores around in my head. I don't even think it's worth a 7 to me. I feel like that's being a little bit too generous, only because out of 11 tracks, there's only 3 that I do actually like. It's not enough for me to give it that high of a score, but I'm not gonna give it much lower. I'm gonna go 6.5. I feel like that's a fair, decent score to give this album. It's good work all around. There's good musicianship here. There's catchy riffs. It's got everything that you would want, just not enough of anything, if that makes sense. But that's my score. 6.5 is what I give Apoptosis from Allegiant. I give it a 7.
So anyway, that's good. Anyway, guys, that's all we got for you guys today. 6.5 and a 7 for Apoptosis by Allegiant. Guys, remember to comment, tell us what you thought of this album after a week after its release. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Like the video if you liked it. I'm TV Fish.
And I'm Vile Self.
And we'll see you guys later.